The nice thing about being last is that everybody said everything you wanted to say to begin with. So my notes are there, useless, and I will speak the way I love speaking, and that is extemporaneously. It can get me in trouble. But it's 60 years, isn't it? What a time. What an interesting 60 years. And that really is an understatement, isn't it? Many of us have been involved in this a long time. You know, we were, you know, in a way, I didn't want to have this celebration. I wanted to wait till the 75th. Then I realized I'm not going to be here. And a lot of the people up here are not going to be there either. So I thought, okay, we'll do the 60th. We had a tough time finding a location, believe me. This is not the best market in the world to have a large congregation of people. We find out that people get married a lot around here. And they'll plan for it years in advance. Hey, if you're in love with her, grab her and go get a judge or something, you know. But that's kind of what my wife and I did, although we had a minister do it. But, you know, my wife and I lived in the same 55-plus place, and I was being stalked. I didn't know it. She had to tell me, she had to send me a note to let me know that she was stalking me. True story. Sent me a... yeah, just sit down. So I didn't really plan on saying this, but I'll catch it tonight. She left a note in my mailbox. The manager says you're an interesting individual to talk with. Would you mind coming up and having a cup of tea? Well, I didn't know it was my cup of tea or not, but I gave her a call. I had no idea who was behind that door when she opened it up. 2 months later, we were married. She's made, I can't praise her enough as my spouse. She's just fantastic. She takes care of me, sometimes a little bit too much, but it's really great. And she, and it's amazing to meet someone who is not a bircher, who knows just as much as a bircher. When I married her, it's incredible what the woman knows, just by being able to discern what she saw on television and in the newspapers. But at any rate, 60 years. You know, Robert Welch used to keep a lot of notes. A lot of people don't know that. And we were lucky enough to be sent all those notes by Hid Welch, his son, to headquarters just a few weeks ago, where I started to pour through them. I didn't go through them all, but the first portfolio particularly, I looked at every page. The man was a prolific note taker. He would take notes. Anything that came into his head, he'd jot it down. And so there were a lot of notes about trips he took and people he met and places he'd been around the United States and what he had in mind relative to doing something to save his country. At first, it took a very political bent. He thought, well, I'll run for office, and eventually I think I'll run, build it up till I finally run for president, and then we'll save the country. But the more he looked into the situation, he realized that, wait a minute, politics is not going to solve the problem. The problem is not whether you've got good politics or bad politics. The problem is you have ignorance. You can't have good politicians elected if your constituents are very ignorant about the difference between a republic and a democracy, for instance. All that sort of thing. Things that back in the 1950s were almost lost to the American people. The conservative movement today knows that this is a republic, not a democracy, because of Robert Welch and the John Birch Society. Before, it had been gone. We were a democracy. That's all there was to it. So he began to realize, I've got to form an organization that will start educating the American people. And that's when he started to really look into things. Another thing that really stood out in his notes was that everywhere he went and the people he met, for the first time, he would jot their name down and then note how many children they had. I thought, that's strange. But when you really look at it, what else are we doing this for? Are we doing this for ourselves? Or are we doing it for the children and the grandchildren? Not only to inform them, but to inform them to a level of understanding to where we can save their liberty and also teach them how to keep it. And that's when Mr. Welch really started to put together the John Birch Society in his mind. And like Clark said, can you imagine what we would be like today without the John Birch Society? The various things that we started immediately told the enemy that we, the new guy on the block, was dangerous to their success. They began to realize that they've got to stop the anti-communist movement in the United States that had found vitality through this new organization called the John Birch Society. So they launched an attack against us that lasted for nearly a decade. Then they realized that they were not going to get anywhere doing it this way, so they put the silent treatment on us. That's why people today even say, are you still in existence? What is the John Birch Society? Before, we'd have 700 to 1,000 attacks a day against the John Birch Society. You think this Kavanaugh thing is bad? It was like that times 10 for 7 years. And it was not an easy thing to live through. How many here, when you joined the John Birch Society, lost all your friends? Yeah. Or your family. It helped me because I lost my family and my friends, but the few I wanted to keep, I worked at it and got them back. But at any rate, it was not easy back in those days to join the John Birch Society, but you knew you had to do it because there was nothing else. Because we were organized like no one else had ever been organized, nor is organized today. We work with concerted action. We have an agenda. Do you realize that most organizations do not have an agenda? They battle issues almost on a daily basis, or they're a single issue organization. They have no agenda because they don't understand the enemy that they fight. Since 1797, Abbe Barruel, in his monumental work on Jacobinism, said that the reason that the French Revolution could not be stopped was because the people in authority didn't understand that they were fighting a conspiracy. And unless, he continued, unless you understand that you fight a conspiracy, you will not be able to stop this because you do not understand the agenda and the people behind it. And that's something that we have to take to heart. Now, one of the things that our forefathers knew, the people that founded this nation knew that conspiracies existed. The evidence is there just if you look at it. For instance, John Jay, the first Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, was the chairman of the New York Committee to detect conspiracies and defeat them. That was the title of the committee. They actually looked for these conspiracies so they could ferret them out. They knew during the Revolution that there were British conspiracies to bring down the Revolution. But after the Revolution, they knew there were other conspiracies that they had to defeat as well, and those were the antecedents of the same conspiracy that we battle today. There are writings of Abigail Adams and John Adams and George Washington that let us know they knew what these things were. George Washington knew that the Illuminati existed and was in the United States, and he knew that the Whiskey Rebellion was part of it, that this was a monstrous, evil conspiracy, and it just kept growing and growing and growing. It kind of ebbed after a time because the wellspring was destroyed in France. Mostly it came from the Illuminati in Germany through France to the United States, particularly in the person of Robespierre. So when Robespierre was taken out, the Jacobin movement in the United States went into a waning period. We battle that same conspiracy today. And as I pointed out during the panel earlier here, they have two goals that we can never keep our eyes off of. Those two goals are what? A one world government and the elimination of God. That is the underlying purpose of everything they do. They may zig and they may zag and they may support this or be against that, but in the long run, those are the two main things that they want to establish. And of course, they want to run the one world government. Luckily, a lot of these people don't like each other as much as they don't like us. So they always fight each other. So that's always to our benefit. But at any rate, because of the way Robert Welch organized the John Birch Society, and what I mean organized, he organized us, a bunch of volunteers, into units all over the country working on the same thing at the same time, using the same slogans, using the same literature, going in the same direction. And it's a force that they can't work with. We're driving them crazy, you know. You ever thought why they're behaving the way they're behaving now? Because they see that the American people are aroused. They're stirring. They know they're on a precipice, if you will. They know that if the American people get enough of the right information into their hands to follow good leadership, they are going to lose. It is that simple. And they're scared to death. And they're acting crazy, aren't they? They are. I mean, you know, it's like a little kid with a tantrum. So we can see these things and we get worried about these things, but these are signs of the fact that we've got them worried. You know, when the John Birch Society first started, Robert Welch figured we had 1 in 100 odds to win this thing. Many of us thought it was going to be over within 10 or 15 years in the early 60s. How many here remember that? Sure. It looked like we weren't going to win. How many times over the years does it look like we weren't going to win? And yet we were able to do things to prevent the takeover of the United States. We stopped the nationalization of the police. We lowered the opinion of the American people relative to the United Nations. We made the federal elections, one of the big issues in the federal elections, who we vote for, because that guy is going to appoint Supreme Court justices. Before the impeach Earl Warren committees, nobody thought about that. Before they get us out of the United Nations, everybody supported the United Nations. Before they support your local police committees, nobody had any idea that they wanted to have a national police force in order to rule our citizens. And those things really started to change the political atmosphere of the United States to where the other side was very, very worried. Their original timetable for taking over the United States was 1976, the 200th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. They didn't make it. And they had been planning since the early 60s and finally implemented in the late 80s the so-called collapse of communism, of how to make it look as though communism had been defeated so the American people would go back to sleep. Once they did that, it became harder to recruit members into the John Birch Society, because why bother? Communism's dead. But then they started a new program of how to make people support something in the name of good business and conservatism. Things like trade treaties, NAFTA, the TPP, and so on and so forth. A good deal. We're going to have jobs in the economy. And people lost sight of the fact that you can recover from a lack of jobs and a bad economy, but you can't recover from a loss of sovereignty. And so they were sneaking in this sovereignty-killing aspects into these trade agreements. And so ultimately, NAFTA started to show its colors through used as the base of the North American Union. And what happened when we had the North American Union crop up? The John Birch Society started to roll. And we became the point of the spear in that whole movement. and stopped the North American Union in its tracks. Now, they started to bore underground, and the deep state kept it moving in secret, albeit slower, but we were able to stop that. And the timetable for the implementation of that thing was 2010. We stopped the FTAA. The original timetable for that was 2005, the free trade area of the Americas. They were going to make a European Union out of the whole Western Hemisphere, and we were able to stop that. The Trans-Pacific Partnership, the TPP, when we started that campaign, nobody knew what we were talking about. We went into Congress, for instance, and sat before over 30 congressmen face to face. And you know, not one of them knew what we were talking about. Within 3 years, it became a campaign issue. And it was a huge issue in the 2016 campaign. It had a deadline of 2015. And we were able to stop that. Every time they give us a target, if we've got enough time, we can shut that down and stop their timetables. We're doing it over and over and over again. And a lot of times we fight our own friends on these things because they don't understand the issues. One of those things that's coming up right now is the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement. It is far worse than the original NAFTA agreement, by far. Congressman Massey mentioned the World Trade Organization. The USMCA subordinates itself to the WTO within the body of that agreement. It also subordinates itself to the International Labor Organization and the UN in general. And there are a lot of things about this that are far worse. Now, we're going to be able to import a little more milk into Canada, which seems to be the big deal in a lot of people's minds. So we're going to get some nice little trading deals out of it. But the sovereignty aspects of this new agreement are far worse than NAFTA. The head of the Council on Foreign Relations, Richard Haass, has said that this new agreement is NAFTA plus TPP plus 10 to 20%. And let's get her done. So that's what's going on. And yet, have you heard a single pundit on Fox or any other place of these conservative leaders saying, hey, this is a real problem? No, every one of them has come out for this. So we're going to be fighting our own friends. We have to really work at getting them convinced of what's really in this thing so that they climb on board and help us stop it. This time, however, we don't have the kind of time that we had with the TPP and some of these other things, so it's going to be rough. But the thing is, and the point of all this is, these things are being done by subterfuge. They're making everybody think they're getting a good deal. They're sort of like a Judas goat. And what we have to do is to show them that these are not good deals. These are going to lead to handcuffs on the liberty of the American people. But we can do it. We can do it if we have the will to do it. And, regrettably, I have to mention it, if we can raise enough money to be able to do it. Because it's going to take a few dollars to get the thing rolling. At any rate, the point, again, is that they're doing these things because they know the American people haven't fallen for the old program. They had to adopt a new program of getting conservatives believing that they were winning and get conservative arguments, economics and trade and all of that stuff, not understanding what was really at the root of all of it. So that's good. It shows that we've forced them into that position. If we can expose these things, even a little bit, it will slow them down. And if we expose what's really going on, what are they going to do? They're going to go back under the rocks, aren't they? And that's going to give us more time. And the more time we can buy, the more we can educate the American people as to what's really going on with all of these trade agreements. They are dangerous, every one of them, because people don't read them. I mean, how many here have read the 1,800 pages of the New Deal? I don't think Trump has either. I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt. He's just taken the decades-long member of the Council on Foreign Relations, Robert Lighthizer, word for it. And he does have a few people there next to him that are pushing all of this. Bilderberg people, CFR people, so on and so forth. And he doesn't seem to understand that. He's interviewed them, and they look like they're really good. Another problem that Trump has, however, is even if he wants a real good person, I mean, that all of us in this audience can say, yes, that is the person for that job, how many people think they could get it through the Senate of the United States? Look at the Kavanaugh situation. Can you imagine trying to get somebody the head of the education department that is going in there to abolish it? You know, it's not going to happen. Somebody who says, yeah, we've got to get rid of the energy department and just give me the job and I'll help you do that, they're not going to get through the Senate. So you've got a problem where an individual, even if they know what's going on and want the right people in the right place, they have to go through this gauntlet, if you will, called the Senate of the United States. And what was it, one vote for Kavanaugh? What was it, one or two vote spread? Two vote spread? That's close. That's really close. And so what we are seeing is this sort of fight happening now because they know they are in trouble. They say that the Democrat Party has swung to the left. How many people here really believe that the Democrat Party has swung to the left? All they are doing is exposing what they've believed all along. They are members of the Socialist International. They're members of the Communist Party in the Congress of the United States. That's simple. They're now standing up and screaming and exposing themselves of that. But nobody's talking about that particularly. Once in a while, I must say, recently we're starting to see a few people use the term communist on TV about some of these people. But they don't identify which ones they're talking about, which is important. But at any rate, we have them on the run, and most people don't really realize that. When we started the organization, we were 100 to 1 against us. Those odds lessened over time because of the work of our members all across the country to where it became about 1 in 10. I believe today, I honestly believe today, that the odds for winning are 50-50. Now, why do I say that? Which are pretty good odds compared to what they've been. I say that because it's obvious that these people are scared on the other side. They're afraid of losing because they know how precarious their positions are. I say that because millions of American people are standing up and shouting that these things have to stop. Look at all these rallies for Trump, for instance. I don't care whether you think that Trump is 100% or 50% or 75% or whatever. He's saying the things that they believe in. He's against globalism. He's stopping a lot of these international agreements and everything else. And so tens of thousands of people turn out for his rallies, and tens of thousands of people are outside that couldn't get inside. There's an arousing amongst the American people that tell us if we strike and strike hard and with the right information at the right places, we are going to turn this thing around. And that's what these people fear. So we do have them on the run. It's just a matter of we can keep them on the run. It's going to take the will to do it. And I think that we have that will. I know we have it on the staff, and I see it in the hearts and on the faces of a lot of our members, and particularly our volunteer leaders. If we can get to the right people if we can disseminate the right information, we're going to stop this treaty, or that's what they don't call it a treaty, they call it an agreement, but for all practical purposes. And keep in mind, too, on these things, an essential danger in every one of these agreements, particularly this new one, is it abrogates the mandate of the Constitution of the United States for the Congress to regulate trade with foreign nations. They give that right up, and those agreements become self-perpetuating. They can change this. They can alter it. They can fluctuate it back and forth. They can stop or begin tariffs and everything else. And another thing that's in here that is very interesting is that one chapter in this agreement gives the guarantee to the country of Mexico the right to keep their gas and oil under their control. Now, why don't they do that for the United States? Just Mexico, you see. Why don't they do that for Canada? No, just for Mexico. So that raises some interesting questions. One is why. Maybe the Mexican leaders know a little bit more about the future of where this treaty is going to go and what it's going to mean. How many here remember, or maybe didn't notice it, the report that Christian Gomez dug out about a regional energy commission for North America? It's called the North American, energy integration, North American energy integration. Well, what does integration mean? Merger. And they are merging through the United States Congress and Canada a North American consortium, if you will, of all energy. We are turning over all our gas and oil and atomic and uranium and everything else to this regional integration agreement. So a lot of people, they don't see that and how that bears down on this new treaty. And another question I've got to ask is, why in the world would we sign an agreement with a socialist Canada and a corrupt, soon to be ruled by a communist Mexico? They're putting a communist in as president of Mexico on, was it December 1st? This does not bode well for the future. And so we've got to point these things out and ask these questions. Does this really make sense? You know, why is it that we were able to trade with Mexico and Canada for 200 years and now we need a treaty like this? It doesn't make any sense. Asking questions. At any rate, we have a lot of friends out there, a lot of people that depend on the John Birch Society for valuable information. We can get that to them. We just have to make up our mind to do it. I am firmly convinced, again, that we're at 50-50. It's a matter of what kind of will we have and what kind of pressure we apply at this time. And I know in my heart, because I see it on a national scale. Sometimes you only see your neighborhood or your city or your state or whatever, but we have the advantage at headquarters amongst some of us to see how things move and how things change and the political atmosphere because of the things that we've been able to put together and get our members going on. And it's very gratifying. A lot of times, and this is one of the things Robert Welch said, we don't spend a lot of time and effort tooting our own horn. We spend all our time and money and effort on the battle. And yet how many other organizations spend a lot of time and effort on telling you, look at me, aren't we wonderful, we're doing this job, and so on and so forth. But they don't have an organization. And often you veteran members know that a lot of these organizations have taken credit for your work. You set the stage and somebody else came and grabbed the flag and went up and put it up on the flagpole when it was your work. The way we work, the way we are organized, we are not seen well by the general public. They don't see us because we don't do things to draw attention to ourselves. We just quietly go about our business. We're not secret. We just don't call attention to ourselves as we do these things. The work itself, the altruistic attitude amongst our members is sufficient reward, isn't it? To know that we're able to do these things without finding some sort of earthly reward for it. I kind of look at it as being part of that mansion that's expected, I expect, later on. At any rate, where there is a will, there is a way. And we have the will, and we're establishing the way. And we're going to ask you to get on the road and go with us towards another victory. I know we can do these things. I know that we can stop this if we're given enough time. We might not have enough time. But even with that, the educational level that we will produce will be far more than what we had when the original NAFTA was passed. You know, what happened when the original NAFTA was passed, everything shut down. Well, we lost that one. What's the next one? We should have kept fighting NAFTA. If we had done that, it would have been shorter years before NAFTA would have been stopped and renegotiated. A long time ago, if we had continued that fight. But we made the mistake of not continuing the fight. On this one, if we can't stop it, we will continue the fight, because that's the only way we're going to get rid of it. You don't give up. You never give up. What's that cartoon or whatever? It shows the frog with his hand around the neck of the crane that's trying to swallow him. You know, sometimes it feels that way. But at any rate, seriously, let me end on this note by saying this, that if we have the will and provide the means, we can, as Robert Welch said, have less government, more responsibility, and with God's help, a better world. Thank you.